Hello. I've always wanted to post something on here, but never really had a story to share. But now I do. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Hannah, and I'm 30 years old. You see, my parents owned a couple of restaurants in our town, and I used to help out a lot there. It was where I earned some pocket money on the side. Life was good, and I had a great relationship with my parents, at least. I did until their behaviour started changing. As my parents opened more restaurants, they started acting snobby. They acted like they were better than everyone else and began looking down on people. It made me really sad and angry because I remembered when we were the ones that were struggling to start our business. Back then, my parents taught me to always stay humble. They told me that it was very important to remember where we came from and to never take anybody or anything for granted. But after their success, it seemed like they forgot all about that. So I decided to move out and find my own place. I wanted to be independent and live by the values they had taught me. It was tough leaving, but I knew I needed to do it. I found a nice apartment a good distance away from them, and as I settled into my new home, I started building a life that reflected my values. I wanted to be true to myself and not care too much about money or status. So I surrounded myself with people who believed in humility and kindness. It was a breath of fresh air to be in a community where being a good person mattered more than showing off money. During my journey of self-discovery, I met the love of my life, Joey. We met at a local farmer's market, funnily enough. Joey's friendly smile and kind eyes immediately caught my attention. We exchanged numbers after a small conversation. We started talking and I found out that Joey came from a family of farmers. He would often take me to his family's farm, and those days were simply wonderful. We would do different farm chores together, like feeding the animals and taking care of the crops. It made me feel so connected to nature and filled my heart with joy. Being surrounded by the vast fields, I saw Joey in a whole new light. His kindness towards the animals touched my heart, and the way he cared for the plants showed how dedicated he was. He had a special bond with the natural world, and which was truly amazing. Joey's gentle nature and hard work made me fall deeply in love with him. It was clear that he was something special. After 8 months of dating, we decided to take the next step and move in together. We knew in our hearts that we wanted to spend the rest of our lives together. It was such a happy time, turning a house into a loving home where we shared laughter, warmth, and sometimes even fresh vegetables from the farm. After dating for a year, I thought it was time for Joey to meet my parents. He was a bit nervous, but I reassured him that my parents would love him because I loved him. Finally, the day came and we went to my parents' house together. Thankfully, they welcomed Joey warmly and everything seemed to be going well. We all sat down for dinner. Everyone was pretty easygoing at the beginning. We laughed and shared stories. I felt grateful that my parents were back to being the people I had always admired. But that illusion shattered pretty quickly. My parents decided to ask Joey what he did for work. He proudly said he was a farmer. I saw my parents' faces drop and immediately knew that they were judging him. An awkward silence filled the room. In order to lighten the mood, my parents laughed awkwardly and asked Joey what he really did for a living. Joey hesitated but said that farming was his job and that it paid well. I was angry that my parents were insinuating that Joey's job was not real. But most of all, I couldn't stand seeing Joey feeling uncomfortable, so I spoke up and asked my parents to stop being rude. The tension eased a bit, but things weren't the same. My parents weren't as friendly as they were before, and it was clear that they looked down on Joey because of his job. Later, when we were alone at home, Joey asked if he did something wrong to upset my parents. I sighed and explained that my parents felt superior because of their successful businesses. They thought they were better than others, and sadly, they saw Joey's job as less important. It was hard for Joey to understand because my parents owned restaurants, and without farmers like him, they wouldn't have good ingredients or successful businesses. Joey was confused, but he had a good point. He said my parents could have worked together with him and saved money. We laughed at how my parents had let fame and success get to their heads. They had forgotten about being humble and logical when the money came in. I wanted to apologize for my parents, but Joey told me not to, because they were the ones missing out on good things because of their pride. In that moment, I realized how lucky I was to have Joey. He saw past material things and cared about me for who I am, not for what my parents had. The next year went by without any big problems between Joey, me and my parents. We didn't spend much time with my parents because they were still pretty judgmental about Joey, and that made me angry. I didn't want to involve myself in any argument for the sake of my mental peace. I decided that distance would be the best thing. Other than that, if you asked me to categorize the year into the best and worst moments, I would be able to give you those. The worst had to be the time my mother called me out of the blue to complain about my life choices. The life choices referred to Joey, of course. During that call, my mum told me that she didn't like Joey and didn't want me to marry a farmer like him. I got so mad. I told her she couldn't control who I loved. She said she was trying to protect me from a hard life, but I told her Joey was doing well and taking care of me. I asked her to stop meddling and just be happy that I found a good guy who treated me right. Even after I stood up for myself, my mum tried to make me doubt my decisions. She said I would regret it. I stayed strong and told her I was willing to take a chance on love because Joey made me happy. Finally, I hung up feeling frustrated but determined. My parents just didn't understand how much I cared about Joey and couldn't see things differently. While it may not seem very significant, the rage I felt in me was something that I had never experienced, which is why I would say it was the worst moment in that year. The best, though? The best moment was the day that Joey surprised me with an amazing proposal. Let me set the scene for you. Joey and I loved to go hiking, so naturally, when there was a clear sunny sky one day, we decided to go on a hike to one of our favourite spots in the woods. We walked through the pretty forest with tall trees for a while. After an hour of hiking, we got to our special spot. It was a little clearing in the woods that had a beautiful view of a lake. It was so magical. At that moment, Joey looked at me with love in his eyes and got down on one knee. He gave me a ring he made himself and asked me to marry him. I was so happy that tears filled my eyes, and of course, I said yes with so much joy. I was hopeful and a little optimistic when I decided to tell my parents about my engagement. I wanted to give them one more chance to accept Joey and be happy for us. But when I told them, my dad seemed disappointed and my mum didn't believe it. It really hurt my feelings. My dad said he was disappointed, but I told him I didn't care. I asked them why they couldn't just be happy for us. My mum said it was crazy to marry a farmer. It hurt a lot, and I reminded them how important farmers were for their own restaurant business. They needed farmers like Joey to have fresh ingredients. My dad didn't think Joey's work was important and said the farmers owed their success to my parents' business. I was so mad. How could they treat Joey like that? I couldn't take their disrespect anymore. I stood up for myself and told them they needed to respect Joey and me, or else there would be consequences. I stormed out of their house feeling hurt, disappointed, and really angry. During all the tough times with my parents, Joey was always there for me. He supported me when their hurtful words made me upset, and he always made me feel better. I kept apologizing for my parents' rude behavior. Joey always said their words didn't matter to him. He only cared about my happiness, and I felt so grateful for him. Finally, our wedding day came, and it was such a happy and beautiful day. Our friends and family were there as we said our vows under a bright sky. We laughed, cried tears of joy, and promised to love each other forever. It was a special celebration of our love and the start of a new chapter in our lives together. 2 months after Joey and I got married, my parents came to our house unexpectedly. They seemed serious and asked us to sit down for an important talk. I felt worried and asked them what was going on. My mother had a cold look on her face as she said they couldn't handle it anymore and wanted to cut off contact with us. It felt like a punch in the stomach. Joey was just as surprised as I was, and I didn't understand why they felt that way. He asked my parents why they wanted to stop being a part of our lives. My father looked at him with dislike and said it was because of him. I felt angry and demanded an explanation from my father. Then my mother spoke up, and her words sounded full of disgust. She said it was embarrassing for them to tell their friends that their daughter had married a farmer. The way she said the word farmer made me furious. I was ready to argue with them, but Joey held my hand, trying to calm me down. It helped a little, but I still wanted to stand up to my parents for hurting us. Before I could say anything, Joey spoke up. He said sorry to my parents for causing problems between them and me. My mother said they would never forgive him with a mean tone. My father made a mean face too and told Joey that if it wasn't for him, they could have found someone richer for me. Someone who would make them look better. Joey stood tall and told my parents how grateful he was to have met me. He said being with me made his life brighter and that he would work hard to make me happy. But my mother scoffed and said she would be happiest if we got divorced, thinking she could find someone better for me. That was the last straw for me. I couldn't accept their disrespect any more. I firmly told my parents to leave our house. They left without arguing, leaving behind a mix of strong emotions. I was really angry, and Joey was hurt by their mean words. I told Joey that I never regretted marrying him, and that being with him made me happier than ever. He felt better hearing that. Although I still felt mad, I told Joey I wanted to get back at my parents for all the pain they caused me. I thought he would try to stop me, but he surprised me by supporting me. He understood how they mistreated me for years and encouraged me to stand up for myself. It felt good to have his support, and I started to calm down, even finding a bit of amusement in the situation as I laughed. That night, Joey and I sat down to discuss our plan to confront my parents. He told me about a bar where his farmer friends often gathered, and we decided to go there the next night. We knew many of my parents' suppliers would be there, and we were ready to put them in their place. I felt a surge of determination. As we arrived at the bar, Joey warmly greeted his friends and proudly introduced me as his wife. We spent the night drinking, laughing, and truly enjoying each other's company. It was a wonderful opportunity for me to get to know his friends better. Though I had met them briefly before, this was the first time I could really hang out with them. As the night progressed, we subtly dropped hints about my parents' disapproval of our marriage. When his friends asked why, I revealed that it was simply because Joey was a farmer. Their expressions turned to disappointment, and Joey took it a step further by revealing that my parents were the owners of several restaurant joints. The table was stunned for a moment before erupting into laughter. His friends refused to accept such slander against Joey and me. They promised to spread the word among the community. Within the next 2 weeks, news had clearly spread. My mother called me in a panic, and I reluctantly answered the call. She frantically told me that all of their produce suppliers had terminated their contracts, and as a result, they couldn't keep their restaurants running. I couldn't help but laugh. I asked her why she was telling me this, as Joey and I had no intention of helping them out. She begged me for assistance, but I stood my ground and reminded her of how they had treated Joey. I told her this was the consequences of their belief that they were above everyone else. With a sense of satisfaction, I hung up the call and refused to entertain any further communication. In the following weeks, I heard the news that my parents had to shut down almost all of their restaurants due to the lack of supplies. They had accumulated massive debt and were forced to sell their businesses. All that remained was a small joint where they struggled to make ends meet. It was a fitting conclusion to their journey. As for me, I felt an indescribable sense of satisfaction. I had stood up for myself and defended the person I loved. I learnt the power of resilience and how toxic relationships should never define my happiness. With Joey by my side, I realized that true wealth lies in love, compassion, and staying true to oneself. From that point on, Joey and I embraced a life filled with love, laughter, and the joy of simple pleasures. We built a future together, rooted in genuine connections and an appreciation for the beauty of nature. Our journey taught us the importance of staying humble, cherishing what truly matters, and never losing sight of the values we hold dear. And so, we moved forward, hand in hand, ready to face whatever challenges life had in store for us, knowing that as long as we had each other, we had everything we needed.